What I'd like to do instead today is kind of jump back to the sort of the foundations of mindfulness and how that relates to calm abiding, cultivating a state of calm abiding, which in Sanskrit is called shamatha. Have any of you heard this term before, shamatha? Shamatha and vipassana are two very key terms in Buddhist meditation practices. Shamatha is that quality of single pointedness of mind, when, such as meditating on our breathing or meditating on an image of some kind, meditating on the present moment, on the body, that by concentrating our attention for a length of time in an open, easy way, that what arises naturally is this sense of peacefulness, this peaceful stillness. It's self-arising. We don't have to make it happen. And so, on one hand, shamatha, or calm abiding, is very much a process of cultivating a single-pointed awareness, what we might call sustained voluntary attention. That's another way that one of my teachers, Alan Wallace, has defined it. Sustained voluntary attention, which is a pretty common translation actually in some of the Tibetan Buddhist teachings. So on one hand, our concentrative attention is sustained, meaning that it remains for a certain length of time with a little bit of effort, with a little bit of presence of mind. We rest attention on an object such as the in-breath, the space, as we gently hold the breath for the count of 1 or 2, and then breathe out, that each of those stages we can just allow the mind to follow and be really rooted within the experience of that inhale, that holding, the exhale, that brief pause before the next inhale. Sustaining the mind there is actually training the mind. It's part of the practice of exercising and developing the muscle to sustain attention in a voluntary way, meaning that it's intentional. But it's also an easeful process. So sustained voluntary attention, or calm abiding, is just that. It's a way of cultivating a sense of deep quiescence, deep relaxation, and one that arises naturally without effort, just by allowing the mind to rest on an object of attention. And of course, the mind will just sort of pop off into any number of other directions. This is what it does naturally. And rather than having that sort of disrupt our experience, we can simply observe it. We can bear witness to that leaving, that sense of distraction, or following impulses, or fighting thoughts we don't want to have, or feelings that we may be feeling that we don't want to have, or feeding more energy into what it is. I often call that the 3 F's: fighting, following, and feeding. Those are the things we sort of want to look out for with thoughts and distractions as they arise, because when we get caught up in them, we're probably doing one of those 3 things, right? We're either struggling or fighting with it, trying not to have it, resist it, pushing it away. Of course, then it comes back tenfold. Following it, just letting ourselves be sort of helplessly pulled into it. And often this is the case with things that feel nice, like a daydream, where we just kind of are like, we're settling into a nice calm place, and the next thing you know, you're drifting off into some pleasant daydream. And as nice as that can be, as pleasant as it might be, it's not meditation, right? Unless we're bringing our awareness with us, or our mindfulness with us, and we're aware in that moment that we're being carried away. The object here isn't to not be carried away, but to be aware that we're being carried away. And with that awareness, we have this sort of larger scope, and we're able to say, okay, I think I'll choose to just come back to my breath or my body. And so we do this repeatedly throughout our sitting. So fighting, following, and then feeding, where we're almost seduced into putting more energy into a thought that comes up, a particular tendency, thought, or impulse that we just willingly begin to feed, such as rumination, and that's a great example of that. ruminating, giving it more energy. And oftentimes that's habitual. It's something that just happens, right? We're used to it. It's probably something we've ruminated on before, in which case there are these neural pathways that just say, okay, we've done this before. Now it's easier to do this time. And it'll go even quicker now, so we can ruminate even faster. So until we begin to recognize that that's what we're doing, and just allow that mental energy to play itself out while we come back to our object of attention. So that's the process of shamatha, is of allowing some concentration onto an object of our meditation. And in so doing, then this calm arising or this calm abiding just naturally emerges over time. And so sometimes we can struggle, or we need to apply a little effort to just let the mind rest on something or bring it back. But eventually, that sense of settling happens on its own if we leave the mind undisturbed. There is a Tibetan phrase, and the translation is, I can't recall all the words in Tibetan, but it's kind of a common phrase that describes this process. It says, just as water, if you do not stir it, remains clear, so too does the mind find its own way into quiescence or peacefulness. Just as water, if you do not stir it, remains clear, so too does the mind find its own way to quiescence or peacefulness. And so largely what we're being told here is we don't have to do anything except leave the mind, just let it be. We don't have to try to do anything with it. And rather, we are bearing in mind, we are bearing witness to things as they come and go. We're also bearing witness to the temporary nature, the sort of transient nature of our thoughts and feelings and experiences, that we get to know them as sort of these ephemeral qualities that just arise and then they disperse and give way to something else that arises and disperses. So this first stage of shamatha, of calm abiding through a concentrated mind, leads then to a capacity called vipassana or vipassana in Pali, which is to gain some insights, to look deeply, which is one of the ways that Thich Nhat Hanh has translated mindfulness, as looking deeply. I really like that. So it's not just being mindful of, but it's also looking and bearing witness to and coming to some realizations. Oh, this is why I might be feeling this way right now. And willingly, with an openness, investigating what are the things that I'm experiencing. Am I having a pleasant thought? Am I having an unpleasant thought? Maybe I briefly label, thought, pleasant thought, unpleasant thought, or a neutral thought, or a sensation. In mindfulness practice, we tend to encourage labeling of experiences as they come. And so, for example, let's say we're sitting here meditating and I hear a thunderclap outside, and it's, whoop, did you hear that? It just happened when I said that. I love synchronicity. You may not have heard it, but right when I said thunderclap, there was a loud thunderclap outside. So you may hear that. It may be distracting in the way that I was just distracted. And but be able to bear witness to see, oh, I was just distracted. Why was I distracted? Because I thought it was pretty cool. But that's noticing, right? That's just kind of noticing. It's just saying, okay, and then letting it go. Just notice without getting caught up. By gaining insights into this process of looking deeply, we come to know the temporary nature, the impermanent nature of our thoughts and experiences, and also that which holds all of them in this open quality of awareness, of clear awareness, of bare awareness, or of witness, presence that is highly vibrant, highly lucid, highly bright, what we might call bright or brilliant mind. And that maybe takes a little bit longer to kind of be able to see, oh, I'm holding my distractions, my thoughts, the gross level thoughts, in the same way that the bright morning sky holds clouds. It's easier to kind of fixate on the clouds. And I love doing some cloud gazing. Actually, I got some great photographs in the last couple of weeks of just these really, right up this way, looking south, some incredible cloud formations, really distinct, sharp lines, and watching them shift and emerge, it was wonderful. And as a contrast to that, this clear, open, vibrant blue sky that was the backdrop for all of this. In a way, that's the metaphor for mindfulness, for paying attention, of course, to the clouds in the sky, but also watching that these things are transient, they're always changing, and that our perspective being that of the open sky, that sees it all unfold and allows it all to be as it is bright and at the same time very clear and still. So this is what we're essentially working our way towards, and hopefully without a whole lot of effort, but with this more of a trust or a faith in the practice itself as it unfolds. Part of the insight practice that comes with vipassana or vipassana. Vipassana is the Sanskrit term for vipassana. And some of you might have heard this term vipassana or insight meditation. Largely, that is the final stage of the four foundations of mindfulness. So what is mindfulness? How does mindfulness fit into shamatha practice? Well, they kind of are overlapping. The first stage of mindfulness, or the first sort of foundation that supports mindfulness, is mindfulness of body. And mindfulness of body here is everything from your posture to your physical senses to your breath. The breath immediately puts you in touch with how your body is feeling, with the senses of the body. You may even feel a change from one moment to the next, and so on. So mindfulness of body, breathing, and what are called the four elements, which we will practice later. It's a really lovely meditation. Some of you have done this with me before. I have a very specific way that I like to incorporate the four elements of earth, water, fire, and space into meditation practice. But those four elements were rooted right in the Buddha's original teaching of mindfulness of body. So paying attention to the elements as they are in change, but also the qualities that each one of those elements provides for us. They basically provide the object for shamatha, for concentrative attention as we're cultivating mindfulness. So you see, shamatha is enfolded into mindfulness. Mindfulness is enfolded into shamatha. The difference between these two terms is really a matter of emphasis. Mindfulness is more of kind of the way we practice, according to the Buddhist teaching. Shamatha is more of a quality of the state that our practice takes. So mindfulness is more of kind of the stages, the process here, and shamatha is more of kind of the state that we're cultivating, more of the quality of mind. So calm abiding through sustained attention. And then vipassana, becoming sort of arising out of that. In the same way, vipassana, which is the same term, only the Pali version, arising out of the first three foundations of mindfulness. Meditating on body. The second one being feelings. So by feelings, we mean, am I feeling agitated today? Am I feeling rather calm? Are there sensations kind of coursing through my pathways in my nervous system, or am I feeling stressed? So feelings really are more about that, or such things as feeling heavy, or am I feeling kind of light today? So that's the second foundation, is paying attention, bearing witness to our feelings as they come and go. And the insight we gain into doing this, the part that is vipassana or vipassana, is witnessing even those feeling states constantly changing. And as we take a deep breath and we hold the breath gently, when we acknowledge the gentleness by which we can just cradle the breath, we feel different. We notice a change in the feeling. That's an insight. Okay? There's a cause and effect insight we get out of just a simple shift, a simple response to how the body feels. And there's a fruit. There's a fruit. So some people might call that sort of a karmic process, and we can certainly see it in those terms, cause and effect. But anyway, it's designed instead to help us sort of gain some insights into the nature of our mind and actually how workable the mind is. This is something that we often may not feel, but the mind itself is ultimately quite workable when we know how to kind of work with the mind. And when I'm talking about mind here, I'm talking about really kind of the mental apparatus, what we might call the mechanism of discomfort, the distractions, the reactions, the grasping, the clinging, the aversion. So, yeah. So the second foundation of mindfulness is feelings. The third becomes mind itself. So we have the first foundation is body, the experience of embodiment that includes breath, senses, and so on. Feelings, paying attention to sensations and just a quality of how we feel in the body, as well as how is the mind today, that kind of thing. And then the third is mind, and that really refers more to sort of the mental process. The process of thinking, what is the nature of kind of my thinking mind? How am I relating to the thinking mind? So that's one of the questions too, is how am I relating to my thoughts? And what else is there besides the thinking mind? And one thing people sometimes will say when we start doing a meditation class at the beginning is, I always thought if I stopped thinking that I would just pass out, that I would die, right? It's not very rational, but it makes sense that somebody might feel that way. But if you just sort of analyze your own experience, if you consider that, you're thinking and you're awake, and the second you stop thinking, you pass out, whoop, another thought comes up, whoop, oh, I'm awake again, I'm thinking, oops, thought is gone, lose consciousness, Anyway, sort of like that, that joke when Descartes was asked if he would like another drink, and he said, I think not, and he disappeared. I think that was Descartes. Was it Descartes or Aristotle? I think it was Descartes. I think, therefore I am. Well, in fact, that's not true. That's partially true. Thinking is an experience of I. But when we stop thinking, we don't disappear, pass out, die, but rather there is that space between, right, what we might call the space between one thought and another thought, where there is a capacity to continue to be conscious. And when we're able to abide in conscious awareness without thoughts, it's a powerful thing. Yeah, very restorative, and so on and so forth. So the nature of mind. What is the nature of my thinking mind right now? Am I having thoughts that are pleasant or unpleasant? Again, am I fighting my thoughts, following them, or feeding them? How am I relating to the thoughts that come? In a way, that's a better project than trying to deal with our thoughts or even trying to change them, but rather, how am I relating to them? So it becomes not so much about the object of my thinking, but my relationship to it. That's where the good stuff is. Does that make sense? We can always bring it back to that. Just notice yourself and practice that. Maybe today when we practice, if you're having a thought arise, it's so easy and habitual just to get swept up by the thought. But when that happens, drop a cue into your mind, maybe your unconscious mind, to ask you, how am I relating to this thought? All of a sudden, your perspective shifts a bit. In your relationship to the thought, you may be seeing, oh, so I've taken my clinging off of the object, and now I'm focusing on how I'm relating to the object. That's actually a little easier to handle than the thoughts. Maybe even change them. Perhaps even just invoke a little bit of loving kindness for the thought we're having. Simple little adjustments that actually can help so much. They lay a really good foundation for further practice. So, thinking mind, the third foundation of mindfulness, just paying attention to our thoughts, allowing them to be as they are, and maybe even getting to know them a little bit better. Say, okay, I'm having this kind of thought, I'm thinking, maybe I'm thinking about doing, so maybe I'd say, oh, doing, or ultimately, it's best, rather than to qualify the thought you're having, just label it as thinking only. Thought. No good thought, no bad thought, no neutral thought, just thought. That's all it is. Same thing with feeling. Feeling. Same thing with sensory experience, such as hearing. So if you've ever been on a retreat and someone starts coughing incessantly, all of a sudden there's a narrative that comes, oh my gosh, they're disturbing my meditation. I paid all this money to be here up in this mountain retreat center, and now it's not quiet. That's just thinking and reacting. And so the more we label those things as they are, we get almost a perspective on them. We see those things as being less tangible than we might otherwise think. Next thing you know, the coughing is done, and you can just kind of continue to practice. But if you're holding on to the narrative that arose in that moment, it's going to be miserable. This is what we call suffering or discontentedness. So learning how to become, in essence, transparent, letting mindfulness be akin to transparency with loving kindness. Letting mindfulness be transparency, akin to transparency with the presence of loving kindness, with gentle awareness. So mindfulness of body, mindfulness of feelings, mindfulness of mind. Then the fourth foundation is what they call mental objects, but really it's better translated as insights. And that's where Vipassana begins, with that fourth foundation. The process of gaining insights into our experience based on the first three, based on body, feelings, and mind. So this is kind of a crash intro course to mindfulness. Some of you have heard this before. But this project of cultivating calm abiding, or shamatha practice, and imbuing that with some awareness of the nature of your mind, noticing if you're drifting on one side into drowsiness, or on the other side into restlessness. What one of my teachers used to use sailing as an analogy, and that mindfulness, or like shamatha largely, is like being on a sailboat, and you're sort of at the helm, kind of guiding the sailboat into calm waters ahead. But there are two kinds of winds that can come up and kind of blow your mainsail off course. And one is that sleepy, drowsy, pleasant, balmy breeze that it can be hard to notice is arising. And that sail just kind of gets knocked a little bit off center. And the key is to notice it. And especially with drowsiness or sleepiness, it's easy to lose that, because we start checking out, we start falling into this sort of dreamy lull of relaxation, and then we're no longer fully present. So when we notice ourselves going there, we just sort of adjust the sail right back into the center. The same thing with the other wind, the wind on the other side of the boat. The wind, it's a little stronger. It's more like the restless, agitated wind that quickly sort of knocks your sail off. It can be a little startling too. But even here, we just guide the sail back into the middle and just keep heading into those calmer waters. So that's an analogy for how to work with this practice of sustaining our voluntary attention. Bearing in mind, bearing witness is the mindfulness. And then the spirit with which we are experiencing ourselves, being that of loving kindness as a foundation to the mindfulness. Loving kindness, definitely the foundation for mindful presence. Because whatever we're bearing witness to, if it's distracting or taking us out of a calm place, is largely suffering. We are witnessing suffering, discontentedness, perhaps resistance to impermanence, the impermanent nature of things, a whole host of things. But the point is that having things like the four elements right at the start of our practice can be really helpful to give us a foundation, give us something that we can anchor our attention on, so that we are cultivating a sense of sustaining our attention, we are abiding in a calm way, and ultimately, we are able simply to bear witness to our own awareness. And this sort of then continues to progress when we're able to abide in a calm way by bearing witness to our own awareness, and we're able to remain there for any length of time. We are actually in a deep state of meditation. We're able to observe from what's called no pointed awareness, meaning we don't have that single point anymore. We're just sort of an open, aware of the openness of our awareness, and we're able to abide there. It's profound, it's natural, and it's an incredible source of restoration, of clarity, of creativity, ultimately what we call the state of suchness, or just abiding in this moment and allowing all things to be as they are.